Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is kind of a spontaneous video, so please forgive its extreme lack of structure, but it's something that I've sort of seen people discussing a bit on social media before. It's something I've spoken quite a bit about before, and I figured now was probably a good time to actually raise the topic once again. So today what I wanted to talk about was why I believe that regional leagues, or something similar, needs to be implemented in North America as well as what we currently see in Europe. And I'm mostly going to be talking in the context of Valorant, but to be honest with you, almost every esport that at least I have followed, this has seemed to be a pattern. So I think that it doesn't really matter what esport you follow, other than maybe a select few anomalies. There is some kind of ongoing meme about the fact that North America is a weaker region, you know, NA near airport, NA LUL, all that shit. And that North America can only survive when they bring in European and Korean imports, dependent on what game it is. And the thing is we know as a fact, just from watching all of these different esports, that there is a lot of raw talent in North America. It's not that somehow North America doesn't breed people who are good at video games, but for whatever reason, there is a consistent problem with North America perpetuating that talent and being able to grow it in the same way that other regions do. Now, I feel like in Rainbow Six, there's a different argument about this every single week on the timeline, where people just argue that in North America, they don't have the same mindset. You know, their approach to practicing and scrimming and putting in the work isn't the same. They just want to spend all their money and show how cool their lifestyle is. As someone who's not a player, I don't really feel comfortable weighing in on that part of the conversation, because at the end of the day, I can't tell you who works harder. I can't tell you who takes their scrims more seriously, and I do think it's a little bit insulting to a lot of players who very clearly do take their work very seriously in North America to kind of be generalized under that umbrella. As much as I definitely do see the whole, like, spending all your money on, like, watches and Balenciagas and shit like that as something that happens way more in North America, but I think that's just a cultural difference. For me, I think one of the most influential and important reasons why North America struggles to keep up with other regions is because many games don't invest in having a substantial tier 2 developmental system through which teams can grow, find consistent opportunities to play, find consistent opportunities to win prize money, and develop their players. Instead, other regions are getting that opportunity, and when their players become more developed and become more experienced, it makes more sense to hire players and import them from those other regions than it does to find endemic North American talent. The one esport of the esports that I've followed that I can think of that is maybe the odd one out here is Call of Duty. Call of Duty is extremely North America focused, but if you have a look at the way that Call of Duty has operated over the last however many years, and maybe not necessarily including the CDL era, there would always be so many LANs that were totally open. Anybody could go to them, including at their biggest events. At the biggest events of the year in Call of Duty would always have an open bracket. So there was regular opportunities for teams to constantly be playing each other. And this is from around the world as well as just in North America. And so we had this really thriving tier 2, tier 3 developmental system within Call of Duty that meant there was a constant cycle of talent who were being built up. Meanwhile, other esports that I've followed, you have Overwatch, who did actually have a really good tier 2 scene back in the day, but then they stopped kind of funding it. Rainbow Six, who have European regional leagues, and they have ones over in Asia, like we have the Russian Major League, we have the Korean, oh, what's it called? Korean? This one. And they've got the Japanese one as well. But they don't have that in North America. There isn't a tier 2 option in North America in Rainbow Six. You look at League of Legends, they have the ERLs, the European Regional Leagues, which are actually these days getting insane viewership because people are so invested in these leagues. Meanwhile, over in NA, you have things like the Path, the LCS, but that's one kind of streamlined option rather than having, like, a full ecosystem, which I think is the difference. In Valorant, what we've come into 2022 with is the VRLs, the Valorant Regional Leagues being introduced, which for now they've said are just going to be in Europe, and that doesn't mean that they won't in the future be in America. They want to see how they go in Europe first, but as it stands right now, North America does not have an equivalent. Now, there are two really big issues with this, in my opinion, and that is A, what I've already mentioned, that you just don't have the constant development of the talent, but B, it means that players who don't qualify to get into VCT and therefore have months of, nothing, while they've got to wait for the next opportunity, how are they going to be making money? How are they going to be sustaining themselves? It is actually pretty impractical and just unfeasible for orgs to be able to pay salaries for a team that aren't competing anywhere and aren't going to be making any money in return. They're not going to be earning prize pool money. They're not really going to sell tons of merch if, why are people going to be invested in these teams if they're not competing in anything relevant? And the thing with that is it means that players just can't afford to give up everything else that they're doing in their life, whether that's university, whether it's a job, whatever it is. They can't dedicate everything to being pro players and developing themselves because there's no money coming in. They can't do that. Most people can't just accept $1,000 a month and just give everything to that cause. They have to make money somehow, which means their full attention is not going to be to the game. All the meanwhile, on the other side of the world, you've got all these Europeans living the high life because they have so many things to compete in. They've got all of the open quals for VCT. Didn't get in? That's cool. You've got VRLs now. And it's the same in so many of these different esports. Personally, in my opinion, I think the best way to go about this in North America would be to have an East, Mid, and West regional split. The main reason that I say that, A, because that's kind of how ping and time zones work, but B, also it means that Canada gets included in with the United States. I think that having Canada as a separate region would probably be a bad idea because Canada being a less populated country, I think means that you would still end up with it being some way behind North America, whereas the whole rising tide lifts all ships or whatever that fucking saying is, means that even if the talent is not quite as developed in Canada as it is the USA, purely by virtue of being included in the same region/league as the USA players, is going to improve the Canadian players as well. And in Valorant, actually, we have a ton of Canadian pros. Canada is not necessarily lacking in Valorant. I just think it would be better for them to be included with the USA in these hypothetical regional leagues. Having it split from East, Mid, and West also means that, if they were to have LAN finals, for example, for their regional league finals, then it's also not going to be too bad a journey or too bad a commitment for any of these teams to be able to make that, right? A little team that's doing really well based in Vancouver isn't going to be expected to travel to Miami necessarily, which would cost a lot more than them having to travel to Seattle, let's say. I think there's a lot of people on social media who say things like, Europe, they do it all by region, they do it all by countries. Of course it makes sense to split them up. And they just kind of see the US or North America as this one big lump that is impossible to split up in any way. And I think that's a little bit of a naive way of looking at it because there's 300 million people in the USA alone. There's not all of them play Valorant, but there's a lot of people and a lot of different ways of splitting them into regions. And I think having so many people and such a huge basis of potential talent not have that opportunity to intercompete is an oversight. I think to all of the people who do postulate that it is, an attitude difference and a cultural difference, having this for, let's say, a year would also kind of answer those questions, right? If we had a really insane tier 2 developmental system available for the North Americans and still at the end of that, everyone was shit, then we can look into some other ideas. I think it's also important that in something like this, the opportunity for third-party orgs should, the third-party TO, sorry, should get involved. I've always been quite a big proponent of third-party stuff anyway. I think it adds variety to an esports circuit. Obviously, it's kind of directly competes with the idea of having a franchise league, but I think that's why third-party for the tier 2 and the developmental ecosystem is actually quite a good idea, because it means that, you know, Riot can maintain control of the actual Valorant Champions Tour, the pro circuit, but then bring in all of these different opportunities for those who are wanting to qualify into that. And even then, VCT is not franchise, but like it's still a system that has been set out for the entire year, and here are all the dates and we run them, that kind of idea. Personally, I think this would be a really great way to encourage development in North America and give the talent who we know exist great opportunities. I mean, even in Valorant so far, we've only had one like proper year of VCT, and what we've learned is that while North America was super dominant at the beginning, they did get overtaken. You get all the way to champions, and again, North America didn't necessarily have the best time. And look over at some of the other esports that I mentioned. Siege hasn't had a North American champion since 2020, and they have struggled a little bit more, despite the fact that North America is the only region that's had a LAN league in Rainbow Six in recent times. League of Legends, the whole like NA's last chance thing with C9 at Worlds this year. Now, I know that it's not necessarily Europe who's dominating the World Championships in League of Legends, but it is still not North America. And this is a consistent thing that we can see across many esports that has to have a reason. I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about CS, but it is a common knowledge that Team Liquid is pretty much the only good North American CS team. North American CS is basically dead. Meanwhile, look at how much it thrives in Europe. I don't know a lot about the scene, I don't follow it, but that is still notable. Because Riot have said that this is kind of just the beginning of implementing the sort of regional league idea, I don't want to turn around and say that, wow, they've missed out on something huge, they're being stupid. I don't think they're being stupid, and I suspect that something like this is probably in the works, or at least being considered, just by the way that they've spoken about it. So what I will say is I'm just very excited to see if that is something that they decide to bring in, and I am curious to see how that gets implemented. But, I mean, even just outside of Valorant and across these other esports I've mentioned, I would love to see a similar thing, because I think that it's almost unfair that all of these other regions get so much, support for anything that is below the top tier, and North America is sort of left like, hey. I'm very interested to know what you guys' ideas would be for this. Like, do you agree with my plan for it? Do you even think this is the problem? This is something that I feel quite strongly about. I'm just quite passionate about, and I think is just a fantastic area to focus on to bring real meaningful change and meaningful improvement to the esports sphere as a whole. So I'm definitely interested to know your opinions. Let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye. Also, it's East, Mid, West, because everyone knows that Mountain Time doesn't fucking exist.